One night, I was working the late shift at a local pizza place. It was a fairly quiet night and not many pizzas had to be made or delivered, so it came as a surprise when the phone rang just before we closed. I was working the counter alone that night, so I picked up the phone, but there was just complete silence, so I decided to hang up. About a minute later, the phone rang again, so I picked it up, and it followed with more silence. I was about to hang up again, when I heard the weak and cold voice of an old lady. She said she wanted a regular cheese pie to be delivered. I was very polite, but inside I was steaming. I just wanted to get home and end my shift. I called my boss and told him that there was another delivery. He said I had to go, but that I could close up afterward. I was upset, but I knew that late calls usually give good tips, so I told the lady it would be at her home shortly, but she had already hung up, so I told the chef one more order. The house was about 7 miles away, and it was very small, not really nice looking either. I rang the doorbell, but there was no answer, and as I looked through the window, I noticed lights were off. I rang again, but nothing. I was about to walk away, when I see the curtains move and reveal a shadowy figure. I couldn't see very well, but I backed up away from the window. Why would I stay there? After focusing, I noticed it was the elderly lady. She looked about maybe 7 years old, but she just stood there, looking at me with a blank look on her face. I told her I had her pizza, but she made no response. I thought that she probably didn't hear me, so I said it louder. She looked at me and smiled, but not with a normal smile, but rather a bone-chilling, eerie smile. I couldn't look anymore, and I decided I don't care what flack I take from the boss, I was leaving. I got back in my car and I texted my boss that I couldn't make the delivery. Then came a tapping sound. Great, it's starting to rain. I just wanted to go home, and now I'm out here at this crazy lady's house in the middle of nowhere, and if that wasn't bad enough, now it's starting to rain. All I could think was, can this get any worse? My mind wasn't prepared for what I saw next, because looking out the windshield, I noticed there wasn't any raindrops. Rather, as I looked out my passenger window, I saw the woman standing there, tapping a knife and her knuckles against my window. That same evil smile still scrawled across her face. Panicking, I put the car in drive and I floored it. I didn't care which way I was going, I just had to get away from her. As I got back to the store, I called my boss and I told him what happened, and ever since, he hasn't made me work another late shift. This happened 4 years ago when I was in high school. I was told to do my last delivery, so I got in my old car and headed out. I live upstate in the country, so all pizza deliveries were a long drive. I remember the sun was starting to set, so I would say it was about 7 o'clock. After about 15 minutes of driving, I finally got to the house. It was a very old place, made completely out of wood. It was sitting all by itself, surrounded by forest. The lawn was unkempt, but I was used to all this, so I didn't think anything of it. There was no doorknob, so I knocked and then yelled, "It's the pizza guy! With your pizza?" Nothing. So I repeated suddenly, but I heard footsteps inside the building head to the door, and they stopped. But they didn't open the door, they just kind of stood there. I yelled again, "It's the pizza guy!" A low voice said from beyond the door, "Bring her to the back of the house." I was reluctant. Then I asked him, "Are you sure, sir?" No answer. I was about to walk back to the car, but I didn't want to have a problem with my boss. Last time I brought back a pizza, I was almost fired. So I treaded lightly as I made my way to the back of the house through the brush. I came across a figure of someone sitting in a chair, opposite my direction in the porch, staring off into the distance. "Excuse me, I have your pizza." But they didn't move or talk. I repeated myself, but nothing. I heard a voice coming from the door just past the silent figure. "Psst, over here." I look in the direction of the whisper and I see this man poking his head through the old door. He had this weird, unnatural smile, as if he knew something that I didn't. He then says, "Come here. I want to show you something." I was so scared I ran back to my car and I drove away. As I got back into town, I called the cops. I got a call back from the police who informed me that there was no one there, nor were there any signs of anyone being there for a long time. I quit my job a few days later. I have no idea what would have happened to me if I would have gone up to that man, and frankly, I don't want to know. I started working as a pizza delivery driver in a small, growing town in Michigan. It was good money, but every once in a while I delivered to an incredibly sketchy place, and I've had a few good stories as well as a few shotguns pulled on me. One night, about 2 months ago, I was delivery on a Friday. Usually Fridays are very busy, but this day was a little slow. So when a delivery came in at 8:30, half an hour before we closed, I jumped on it. I realized it was 7 miles away, so all the closing jobs would have been done by the time I got back, and I would have been able to leave immediately. It was way out of town in a woods surrounded by neighborhood, but again, no work when I got back to the store seemed like a good deal to me, and I'm all about those sort of deals. So I climbed back into my car and went to drive 7 miles away. As I pulled up to the house, I began to get a bad feeling. The house was in a small trailer park type neighborhood next to a lake, the kind that the houses are all a good distance apart with a likely drug problem, and it was completely dark. No lights outside, none inside. There was a single car in the driveway and an open window on the side of the house. I pulled in behind the car in the driveway and sat there for a moment. Something was off. By the house being completely dark, I mean, there was so much as a nightlight that I could see. Usually when I deliver to a dark house, there's at least a light on the upstairs or something that would signal someone being awake, waiting for their pizza. But the house seemed dead. Nevertheless, I put the car in gear, turned off the engine, grabbed the small, cheapest pizza we had, and got out. Without my headlights on, there was nothing. I could barely see the house. The only light was the dim moon. I walked onto the porch and passed the big open window to the front door. As I reached the front door, I saw it. The door was slightly cracked open, just enough for me to see into the void of the house. Thinking of every single horror story movie I'd seen, I said aloud, "Screw that," and I hurried back to my car. I'm a tall, well-built looking dude, but despite my wide shoulders and baggy hoodie, I'm a frail thing. It can hardly fight off a small dog. I got into my car and turned on the engine. My headlights illuminated the house, and almost simultaneously the living room behind the big open window lit up, and a single guy looked out and walked to the front door. I cursed to myself and weighed my options. If I went up to the door, I could die. If I noped out of there, I would 110% be fired. That meant no new car part, no gas money, no cute dates with my girl, just sitting at home doing virtual schoolwork. It was a stupid choice, I know, but I grabbed the pizza and opened the door. Making a choice I'm damn glad I make. I took the car out of gear and climbed out. Mostly so my engine would still be running, so that if I needed, I could run back and immediately take off. I walked to the door where the man had opened the rest of the way. As I got closer, I got a good look at him. I'm not one to judge a person based on their physical appearance, but this guy's head was cleanly shaven and was just covered in tattoos. He was wearing a pair of gray jeans and a white tank top. He had a scowl on his face and was just staring me dead in the eyes. I looked past him for a moment into the house, which was completely empty. As I got close enough that I started opening the pizza bag, he started to reach around his waist. I stopped. He was staring at me with the most evil grin I'd ever seen. I knew in that moment that I was about to die. I had always heard your life seems to flash before your eyes. I thought about my girl, that she wouldn't even know what happened. My work would just stop delivering upon my disappearance, assuming that my body wasn't ever found. My dad would regret telling me he was happy for me landing this job. God save thee. That's when I heard it, the distinct sound of gravel under tires. My only pathetically small chance of escape was rolling away. I didn't even look back at the car to know that. I just stared at the man and was about to say F you when he looked back at my car. I heard the noise of the car rolling. It was getting closer. The guy's eyes went from driveway to behind me. I finally looked over my shoulder till my car had rolled backwards and, because of how I turned the wheels, had rolled to the side and come out to a smooth stop near the mailbox of the house. I looked back at the guy, who had a nervous look. He looked back and scowled again, and then took his hand from around his waist. He reached into his front pocket and took out $12 and handed it to me. I gave him the pizza and watched him slam the door shut. I ran back to my car and practically tore off the door trying to get in. I looked back at the house, and the man was standing in front of the window, staring out at me. You better believe I nearly spun the tires on my way out of there. I kept glancing at my mirrors until I started driving under the streetlights. It was easily the scariest moment I've ever had. As soon as I got back to the store, I told my boss about it and she called the police. We never heard anything about it, and I assumed they went to the house and only found a small cheese pizza. I started carrying a knife on me at all times, and my boss is considering getting trackers for our pizza bags. Only recently I realized this is sort of a butterfly effect. I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened that my transmission went out, and I cursed Volkswagen for designing such a terrible automatic transmission. But if that transmission was still working, then I would have still had that car. I would have put the car in park, and it would have sat there while whatever would have happened to me would have happened. I have zero doubts in my mind that that man was planning on murdering me. So crappy German engineering saved me from getting murdered.